I never thought I'd live to see the day when humanity, for all its infamous patience and diplomacy, finally reached its breaking point. We had spent centuries cultivating our image as the mediators of the galaxy, the ones who could bring warring factions to the negotiating table, the ones who could settle disputes with words instead of weapons. It was what made us valuable to the galactic concords, that vast and tangled web of interstellar governments clinging to a fragile peace. We were not the oldest race among the stars, nor the strongest, nor the most technologically advanced, but we were adaptable, resilient, and above all, we were patient. That patience earned us respect in some quarters and scorn in others. Some species saw us as a necessary stabilizing force, a species willing to sacrifice its own pride for the greater good. Others saw us as weak, too hesitant, too forgiving, too unwilling to claim what we had earned. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps we should have been more ruthless, but that was never our way, not at first. The cracks had been forming for decades. The galactic economy leaned on humanity's contributions, our scientific advancements, our trade networks, our logistical prowess, but we were never given the credit. When pirate fleets threatened trade routes, we were the ones who defended them. When famine struck border colonies, it was our freighters that delivered food. And yet, when our own people suffered, when our outer colonies struggled under the weight of rising conflicts, the Council dismissed our concerns with polite indifference. We should have seen what was coming. We should have realized that our goodwill was not infinite in the eyes of the galaxy. The Zarvians were the ones who delivered the final insult. We had clashed before, but always in minor skirmishes, always through proxy battles and political maneuvering. This time was different. They didn't just attack a military outpost or disrupt our trade lanes. They struck at our people. New Eden was one of our oldest colonies, a shining beacon of what humanity could achieve beyond Earth. It was self-sustaining, peaceful, and prosperous, until the Zarvian fleet arrived. They didn't just conquer it, they burned it. Cities reduced to rubble, civilian ships gunned down as they tried to flee, millions dead. And when we demanded justice, when we stood before the Galactic Council with our grief raw and our patience wearing thin, the Zarvian ambassador simply smirked and said, "Perhaps humanity should learn to defend itself. Perhaps humanity should learn to defend itself." That was the aha moment. The moment the air in the chamber changed. The moment every human present exchanged glances, an unspoken understanding passing between us. There would be no more negotiations, no more patience. The galaxy had made a fatal mistake, and soon they would realize it. The galaxy expected a response from humanity, a formal protest perhaps, a strongly worded condemnation, maybe even an economic sanction, as futile as those had always been. That was the human way, after all. We were predictable, methodical, diplomatic to a fault. But this time there was no response. No speeches in the council chambers, no pleas for justice, no negotiations. Instead, humanity fell silent. It was a silence that spread from the diplomats to the generals, from the trade fleets to the colonies. The usual flow of human envoys, advisors, and peacekeepers came to a sudden and complete halt. The information networks that once connected humanity to every major species in the galaxy went dark, access revoked without explanation. The humans who had served in Concord stations and neutral zones quietly packed their things and left, their faces unreadable. And behind that silence, deep within the core worlds of humanity, something far more dangerous was happening. For centuries, our greatest minds had been focused on progress, on exploration, medicine, energy production, and sustainable development. Our weapons, though formidable, had always been secondary, built only when necessity demanded. That changed overnight. The shipyards of Mars, Luna, and Titan ceased their civilian production, and turned entirely to war. On Earth, factories ran without pause, forging weapons never before seen beyond humanity's borders. Prototypes that had once been shelved due to ethical concerns were dusted off and refined. Warships that had been built as a deterrent were refitted for offense. It wasn't just the military that prepared. The scientists worked in secret, designing weapons that no enemy could counter. The engineers reworked old defenses into unbreakable fortresses. The intelligence divisions, long accustomed to keeping the peace, turned their skills toward infiltration, subterfuge, and disruption. Even the civilians understood what was coming. The outer colonies, long reliant on Concord trade, adapted quickly. Supply chains were rerouted, new sources of food and raw materials secured. Every world under humanity's banner became self-sufficient, ready to withstand whatever retaliation might come. And still, the galaxy did not see it. They mistook our silence for weakness. They believed we were retreating, licking our wounds, too afraid to act. They convinced themselves that humanity had finally learned its place. But they had no idea what we were building behind closed doors. The fleet that once patrolled the edges of human space vanished from the usual trade routes. Where it went, no one knew. The relay stations that monitored our communications stopped transmitting data beyond human borders. Even the most seasoned intelligence agencies could no longer penetrate our networks. The Council debated among themselves, wondering if they should intervene. But without humans present to argue or plead their case, the debates led nowhere. So they dismissed it. They assumed humanity had given up. They would soon understand how terribly wrong they were. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. There were no drawn-out sieges, no mass invasions, no desperate last stands. Humanity did not fight for territory or resources. We fought for something far simpler: annihilation of those who had wronged us. The Zarvians had been the first, but they would not be the last. Every species that had stood by and laughed as our people burned, every empire that had turned a blind eye as our colonies begged for aid, every government that had benefited from our patience while spitting on our kindness, they were all targets now. But humanity did not wage war like the others. We did not meet enemy fleets in open space and trade blows until one side crumbled. We did not give our enemies the dignity of a fair fight. We dismantled them from within, striking at the very heart of their strength. Galactic supply chains were the first to collapse. Every major trade route was disrupted overnight. Human forces targeted key refueling stations and hyperspace relays, shutting down entire sectors in an instant. Planets that had once been thriving hubs of commerce found themselves isolated, their food supplies dwindling, their people panicking. Then came the targeted strikes. Humanity's intelligence networks, long dismissed as passive observers, proved to be something far deadlier. We knew where every high-ranking official slept, where every war council met, where every key research lab was hidden. Precision strikes wiped them all out, one after another. Assassinations, sabotage, cyber warfare. Our enemies never saw it coming. Entire fleets vanished without explanation. Orbital defenses shut down at critical moments, leaving planets vulnerable. Dreadnoughts, the pride of the largest empires, detonated from within as their reactors mysteriously overloaded. Every attempt to coordinate a counteroffensive was met with disruption so complete that some admirals began to believe humanity had spies within their own ranks. But there were no spies, only calculations made with terrifying accuracy. The fear spread quickly. The species that had once ridiculed humanity now whispered our name with dread. They had expected us to plead for mercy, to beg for peace. Instead, we became something they could not predict, something they could not fight. And through it all, humanity remained silent. No grand speeches, no demands, no ultimatums. Just action. The Council tried to broker peace. They sent envoys to Earth, offering apologies, reparations, desperate attempts at diplomacy. But there was no response. Humanity had tried diplomacy for centuries, and it had brought us nothing but betrayal. We no longer had use for words. The lesson was being carved into the fabric of the galaxy itself. The species that had once been known for patience had run out of it. And now, nothing could stop us. The galaxy was unraveling. Every major power that had once dictated the terms of peace and war now found itself on the defensive, scrambling for survival. What had once been a loose but stable network of interstellar governments collapsed under the weight of humanity's war. Trade routes lay in ruin. Military fleets were scattered, broken, and leaderless. Entire planetary economies, once thriving under the structure of the Galactic Concord, fell into chaos. And still, humanity did not slow. The Drath Imperium was the first to realize that surrender was the only option. They had been among the loudest voices mocking humanity's pleas for justice, the first to vote against sanctions on the Zarvians after the New Eden massacre. Their arrogance had made them believe they were beyond our reach. Their fleet, one of the largest in the known galaxy, numbered in the thousands. It had taken centuries to build, its ships forged in shipyards that spanned multiple star systems. They launched a desperate counteroffensive, throwing everything they had into one final battle. They believed humanity could be overwhelmed by sheer numbers, that we would finally be forced into a war of attrition. They never even reached our borders. The moment they entered the contested space, the Vindicator arrived. It was humanity's new flagship, a warship unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It was not just an evolution of human technology. It was the culmination of everything we had learned, refined into a single, unstoppable force. The Drath's fleet crumbled before it, their most powerful warships reduced to debris in mere hours. It wasn't just the firepower that broke them, it was the precision, the cold, methodical efficiency with which humanity tore through their ranks. Every attempt to regroup, every maneuver they tried, was anticipated and countered before they could even execute it. Their commanders began making desperate decisions, their formations breaking apart as panic set in. When the last of their ships went dark, the Drath Imperium surrendered unconditionally. Their leaders, once so proud, now groveled before humanity, begging for mercy. We could have annihilated them. We could have wiped their homeworld from existence, turned their empire into dust. But we didn't, because the truth was, we didn't need to. The Drath were broken in ways that no act of destruction could ever achieve. Their people had seen what happened to those who had crossed humanity, and they would never forget it. Their fleets were gone, their planets left defenseless, their economy shattered beyond repair. One by one, other species followed suit. They sent envoys to Earth, not as equals, but as supplicants. The Zarvian homeworld was already lost to internal collapse, its once mighty empire a smoldering ruin. The remaining governments dissolved their alliances, each one hoping to prove that they had not been among humanity's greatest offenders. The Galactic Concord, the governing body that had once dismissed us, now ceased to exist. Humanity had reshaped the galaxy not through conquest, but through sheer, undeniable force. Fear ruled the galaxy now, not the kind that came from the threat of invasion or destruction, but something deeper, something primal, the kind of fear that lingered in the bones of every species that had once mocked humanity. It radiated horror and anger and hate. No one spoke of war anymore. No one dared. The moment the Drath Imperium surrendered, the last remnants of resistance collapsed. There was no grand treaty, no official end to the conflict. there was only silence. An eerie, suffocating quiet as the surviving empires scrambled to piece together what little they had left. The Zarvian homeworld, once a gleaming jewel of trade and culture, became a testament to the consequences of arrogance. Humanity had not destroyed it. We didn't have to. When we dismantled their empire, when we tore apart the infrastructure they depended on, they turned on each other. Civil wars erupted, fueled by desperation and betrayal. The same species that had mocked us, that had delighted in our suffering, now tore themselves apart without a single human shot fired. Their cities fell, their leaders assassinated by their own people. Their once mighty fleets, now leaderless and starving for resources, fractured into warring factions. It was the perfect punishment. The Council, or what remained of it, tried to maintain order. But without the concord, without the systems of governance they had relied on for so long, their words meant nothing. The power they had once wielded was gone, shattered under the weight of their own hypocrisy. Species that had once viewed humanity as beneath them now looked to us in terrified reverence. They whispered among themselves, trying to understand what we had become. We were not conquerors. We did not take their planets, their people, or their resources. We did not occupy, colonize, or enslave. We had simply removed those who had wronged us. And yet, despite it all, humanity remained silent. We did not gloat. We did not boast. We did not make demands. We merely withdrew, returning to our worlds, leaving the broken remnants of the galaxy to their own devices. That, more than anything, unsettled them. The fear was no longer about what we had done. It was about what we were capable of. About the knowledge that if any species dared to cross us again, there would be no warnings, no negotiations, no second chances. The lesson had been taught, burned into the very fabric of the stars, and the galaxy would never forget it. In the years that followed, the galaxy was forever changed. It was not the aftermath of war that left the deepest scar, nor the shattered empires and fractured alliances. It was the knowledge, shared in hushed tones across every corner of the known universe, that humanity had been pushed to the brink and had finally broken free of its self-imposed restraints. The galaxy had learned the hard way that there was no such thing as an infinite well of patience, and humanity had shown them exactly what happened when it ran dry. The former powers of the Galactic Concord, now reduced to struggling remnants, continued to limp along, each trying to rebuild what had been lost. But they were no longer the leaders of the stars. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted. The species that once looked down on humanity now had to contend with the harsh reality that we could destroy them at will, not through brute force, but through cold precision, efficiency, and an unflinching resolve. And we were not done. Humanity did not seek dominion over the galaxy. We did not wish to impose our rule on the survivors, nor did we make efforts to conquer the territories once held by those who had fallen. But we did not forget. We held the knowledge of what had happened, and we used it. Human diplomats reappeared in the corridors of power, not with their hands outstretched in hopes of peace, but with a firm understanding that we could leave or return at a moment's notice. The galaxy had been reminded that humanity could choose when to act, when to speak, and when to be silent. And silence, as the galaxy had learned, was the most terrifying weapon of all. We had not forgotten our past, nor the insults and injustices inflicted on us over centuries, and we did not forgive. But neither did we seek vengeance. The war was not about revenge. It had been about setting a new precedent, one that would echo through every corner of the stars for generations to come, a warning that no one would dare to ignore again. Humanity had suffered, endured, and waited. But now, we controlled our own fate. And that was more powerful than any fleet or weapon. As the years passed, former adversaries came to realize that humanity's patience had been a gift. It had been the thing that had held us back, the thing that had kept us from destroying them long ago. But no one could ever take it for granted again. Some species, broken and humbled, sought to align themselves with humanity, offering what little they had in the hopes of a future partnership. They knew they could not withstand us if the day ever came when we decided to strike. Others, less wise, tried to rebuild their forces, hoping for a moment of strength when they could challenge us again. But those whispers fell on deaf ears, for humanity's strength was no longer defined by the weapons we wielded, but by the silent knowledge that we could choose to act when and how we wished. The galaxy would never be the same. It had been reshaped, remade by the moment when humanity's patience snapped, and from that moment, no species would ever forget the price they would pay if they dared to test us again.